In the era of AI, everyone can study the math. Everyone can pick up programming. What separates those who talk about AI and those who get things done is the quality of their ideas. Introducing design thinking with AI, powered by Seralytics, a structured process to empathize, define, and ideate solutions with AI. Through this 3-day workshop, participants will be immersed in a creative process centered on the user to build solutions with artificial intelligence. Through our Design Thinking with AI program, participants will walk away with a proven process to generate clear problem statements for specific users and create unique solutions for business, personal, and societal challenges. Our people are passionate about using data for social impact. We understand the ethical use of data and AI. Using design thinking with AI, we have predicted epidemics from social media and satellite data. We have fought for human rights and promoted innovation through big data analytics. From data visualization to computer vision to natural language processing and process automation. Through the power of design thinking, we hope to unlock the broad adoption of AI in the Philippines. Design Thinking with AI, powered by Seralytics. AI-driven innovation, human-centered impact.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. We're just about to start AI for Lunch, episode 8. Actually, the 9th webinar already. This has been going on for 3 months. So far, so good. Good afternoon, Mark. I see people joining the live Zoom. Mark, Titus, Michael, Dean. Hi, Dean. Paula. Sige, I think we should start already. It's 12 o'clock on the dot. So welcome everyone to episode 8. Today we're going to be discussing design thinking, which is, I guess, next to digital transformation, one of those buzzwords that you hear a lot about, but actually, to be honest, most people don't really appreciate. So hopefully after today, everyone will have a common understanding of what design thinking is. So for those of you viewing on Facebook or who don't know me yet, my name is Doc Ligot. I've been conducting these webinars for going on 3 months. My background is actually quite varied. I started in financial services and then worked in IT. And then now I'm an entrepreneur. I run several AI companies. And actually, this topic of design thinking is very close to my heart because this is actually the design process we use in our companies. So what I'll be guiding you through what I would probably consider the secret sauce of what we've been doing. So I'm looking forward to that. So these webinars, as I said, I started them basically to get everyone on the same page about AI and various topics. So over the past few months, we've been discussing everything from jobs to art to education. And lately, we've been diving deeper and deeper into more application topics. For example, in episode 6, we discussed AI in social impact. And last episode, we discussed AI in digital transformation. And I think that was an excellent segue to design thinking because design thinking is really at the heart of innovation. And that's what, we do a lot. So AI and innovation. This is still basically a high-level view of design thinking. And actually, as I said, it's really the process that we use in Cyrolytics, in AEDES, in data ethics to come up with things. So I guess customary is for us to look at who really signed up for this webinar. So I asked 2 questions, if you remember in the registration. How many of you actually do design work in your jobs? And I'd say easily, nearly everyone does, no? 95% of those who signed up. So this would be of interest to you. Some actually do, almost 38%, almost 40% do design in more than 50% of their work. So that's great. Now, the interesting thing is this chart on the left. So I intentionally broke it into 5 parts because these are the 5 components of design thinking. And what's very interesting is most people are clustered on the second and the third step. Actually, the question was, which is the most important step? And most people said problem definition followed by ideation. And I think this is not surprising. Most people would think of problems or solutions when you talk about design. But hopefully after this session, you'll see that these are actually secondary to a more fundamental step, which is really fleshing out who is going to use this. And I would argue this bias towards problem and ideation is potentially part of the problem of design, as it's practiced today. So I see more people joining us. Hi, Sir Titus. I recently gave a talk on the Philippine Computing Society, and I think many of them signed up for this webinar. So hopefully you'll enjoy this as much as you enjoyed that talk. Okay, if we cross the 2, it's also interesting. Like those who do more than 50% of their work involving design thinking or some sort of design, majority of them are actually in the problem definition stage. While those who do some design thinking, up to 50%, their bias is towards solutions. Interesting, isn't it? So depending on where you sit, the more design work you do, the more you shift towards kind of the problem. If you do some design work, you're really more solution-oriented. Again, this is not really a wrong answer. There's no right or wrong answer. But it's an interesting bias that I'd like to address. Of course, if we look at industries, we had quite a number of people who signed up. It's also interesting where, again, this is just people who registered for the webinar. No? It's not to say that everyone in the Philippines thinks this way, but it's good when you see some trends. Like, for example, if you're in the marketing field, you're almost all about problem definition. I guess if you're coming up with advertising or PR, you really want to dive into what's the brand issue. Another thing that stood out is the healthcare component, the healthcare people, like doctors, hospitals. They're more about the end user. And that makes sense. No? If you're going to be treating people with diseases, you want to look at, okay, who am I treating? Other things that stand out, the industrial industries like utilities, manufacturing, they're about solutions, same as government, creating solutions. And on prototyping and testing, I think everyone seems to be in agreement with an interesting exception. In education, a lot of them are actually more into prototyping a solution. But the grand majority are here in the ideation and the problem definition part. Interesting, isn't it? So you will find that this becomes an interesting context when we look at the actual steps in design thinking, and then let me know if your bias changes. No? Okay, so for the remainder of the 1 hour or so, I want to talk about 5 things. One is, obviously, I'll start with AI again. I usually start with what are we talking about in terms of generative AI, discriminative AI. And then I'll dive into what I would call poor design choices because we see them everywhere. So in fact, after today, I'm sure you'll be more sensitive to badly designed things. And then dive into design thinking proper, try to understand what that's all about. And where does AI fit in that? No, I think that's the life hack for this session. I think many of you might have already been doing design thinking in some shape or form, but the real outcome here is I want to show how AI can supercharge a design thinking process, and then show some examples based on our own experience in serialytics and data ethics of what we've done with design thinking, just to serve as an inspiration for those who have yet to do design thinking and other things, right? Okay, so yeah, let's dive to it. Again, many of you have seen this before. So up until recently, November 2022 to be exact, when the launch of ChatGPT occurred, when you ask most people about AI, most people will think about discriminative AI. Basically, this is AI that interprets data. So you give AI a picture of a cat, it tells you if it's a cat or not. Now, more recently, most people, when you ask them about AI, they'd be thinking of the generative type of AI, meaning this is AI that produces data or generates data. So if you give it a picture of a cat, it creates more cats. If you prompt it with the word cat, it creates a cat. So I talked about in another webinar how discriminative and generative AI mirrors kind of some traditional views of the human brain. So the discriminative AI is more about perception. You're interpreting information. That's kind of left-brained. While the generative AI is more about creativity, about coming up with ideas. That's more right-brained. Again, traditional views of the brain. But it's nice how these two types of AI kind of complete the loop. You use them together, actually. One is not better than the other. But I will focus on the generative AI part, because obviously that's what everyone's excited about now, and how this can help with design thinking. So when we talk about generative AI, it's AI that creates pictures, variations, and most importantly, the chatbots. And actually, reducing generative AI to just chatbots is also misleading. Actually, it's the language models underneath the chatbots that are really the key element. Because if you're able to give a language model an instruction and it gives you a response, you can use that in many ways. No? So later I'll dive into how that can affect design thinking. Okay, let's start with the fun part. Some really bad design choices. So in each of these examples, I want you to look closely at what's happening and kind of I try to figure out what went wrong in the design process. No? So here's the first. Here's an unintentionally naughty cake. So obviously, depending on which view you take, the cake can be benign or naughty, no? And this could be anywhere from the prototyping stage or even in the ideation stage. It's kind of the failure to appreciate how the user might use a product because you didn't think it thoroughly enough. And to be honest, it's actually impossible to think about every possible interaction a user can take. But some of this can be quite basic. Like, for example, does the word to resemble something else when you look at it from the other side? Here's another example of opposing views. For those of you who play chess. So where is the chess piece? Is it on E2 or D7? depending on what you're looking at. No, it can be in both. So this is an example of not necessarily over-engineering, but maybe a failure also to integrate opposing views. No? So you think it's as simple as laying out the grid on both sides, but actually the sides are actually different. No? Interesting. What about this? Form over substance. Actually, it is really form over engineering. No? So God forbid, most people in the building would stand on one side, that whole thing could probably collapse. No? So something that you thought was creative, and actually doesn't even look creative, results in a very unsound structure. There's a lot of examples of this out in the open. No? Maybe we should start a meme thread on Twitter or Facebook. Find examples of really bad designs. I'm sure on the road of the Philippines, you can find many examples. Talking about roads. So I'm sure the cyclist group would probably get enraged by this. So here's an example of a correction that makes the error worse. It was already bad enough that the waiting shed was on the bike lane, but actually it could work, no? Given that the shed allowed bikes to traverse. No, you can do an ingress and egress from the waiting shed. But by eliminating the markings on the ground, you've just violated two things na, the waiting shed and also the bike lane. So here's examples of, when I think the best example I can think of is, remember back in the day, those who live in NCR, when everything was a U-turn, I think this was during the time of Bayani Fernando. They wanted to eliminate the bottleneck at traffic intersections. So they removed all of the traffic intersections and turned everything into a major rotonda. And actually, for a while, it worked, but that didn't take very long to create its own traffic congestion. It's very annoying when I see this in hotels, occasionally airports, although airports tend to be well designed. I can't say for the Philippines though, but this is where you give detail and the detail trumps comprehension. No? So it takes you a while for your brain to process the directions because there's no logical order to it. No? It starts with 301, jumps to 338, goes down, goes up. Again, who would do that? No? Why not renumber everything more logically? Yeah. So I can just speculate this was probably a last-minute decision to create some labeling after the rooms were already numbered. So again, there's the problem of a correction that results in a worse issue. I don't know if you've ever seen hair blowers that melt because of the heat. So this is I think more of an execution issue, an engineering issue. The form looks correct, but the way the device was created, the materials wasn't properly, I guess, thought of. No? There's a natural melting point for every material. So I don't know if this is an issue of the body melting too soon or the blower being too hot, because the ultimate outcome was really to dry your hair. So if you have a blower that actually melts plastic, imagine what it does to your hair. Here's another example of something that should never have been built until the design was vetted thoroughly. So you check a tick box. There's certainly a PWD ramp, but it's a ramp to nowhere. There's a lot of this, actually. So maybe this is where compliance conflicts with design. So maybe the priority was to install a ramp, but nobody cared whether the ramp actually worked or not. And this is going to be the last example now, but there's a lot. Actually, if you click that link on the bottom, you'll see a lot of examples now. So this is, if you look closely, the metal ring on the microwave actually sits on top of the plastic cover instead of underneath. So here, either the ring was an afterthought, which is unlikely because the design seems to indicate that you need a ring around the LED display. Probably an error in the sequence in manufacturing. Nauna yung plastic compared to the ring. Again, so many examples like this. So I think hopefully that gives you an idea of why design is important. I recently was part of a project. It's still ongoing, actually. Anyway, the bottom line was the proponent who hired us questioned the need for design. They said, why don't we just jump to solution mode? And, this is really the task that we want. And we were insisting, no, before we get to that, we have to do design work first and identify the problem. And it took some convincing for them to agree. And the fun part was, without getting into specifics, the work we were doing is actually a correction of an earlier project that also didn't have a design phase. And the reason why we needed to be hired was to correct kind of a wrong solution that was implemented. And it escapes people's, I guess, natural intuition that the solution was problematic because there wasn't any design work. So it's still amazing how people make that mistake. Okay, so let's start first from the beginning. So where did this design thinking philosophy start? And I think most literature would indicate that it started with the work of the likes of John Arnold. He wrote this really seminal book on creative engineering. And the book identified 4 areas of creative thinking. So for something to be creative, it had to satisfy, or it potentially satisfied at least one of 4 criteria. No? First is it's a novel functionality. In other words, it's never been done before, or something completely new. No? That's a typical sign of creativity. Another criteria would be higher performance. So there's an error there. No? Talk about design thinking. So if it doesn't necessarily need to be completely new, but if it's something that results in a better version of an existing thing, then that's creative. Third, lower cost. So something that was previously expensive, if you can find a way of making it cheaper, then there you go. You've achieved something creative. And then finally, increased salability. Now, this is sometimes contentious when you talk to designers and creatives, because I have encountered people who will argue that what I did was a creative thing, irrespective of its salability, if people bought it or not. And then if you get into the nonprofit side of things, they don't even talk about sales at all. If you talk to NGOs, it's all about impact. And I would argue the same way David Ogilvy of the famous advertising firm would argue: if it doesn't sell, it's not creative. Sorry to say it. Or you're more of an independent artist and you don't really care if people buy your work. So you're not really in creativity work. And it's contentious because some people might argue otherwise. If you get into NGO land, it's even more the case. If it's not impactful, then it's not creative. In other words, whatever you created, no matter how complicated or elegant the design, if it doesn't result in the outcomes that people wanted, then there's a challenge there. I'm seeing a comment here from Almer David. I believe if design is established as the primary priority, it's already 75% done. You know what? There's a quote from an old cartoon. I don't know if people remember G.I. Joe. And there's always this moral lesson at the end of the episode. And the quote was, knowing is half the battle. And if we split knowing into those two parts, perception and creativity, if you're able to hack those two things, I would agree. Unfortunately, a lot of people are not incentivized to think. We're just incentivized to do. Okay, so moving on. So John Arnold, but actually the practice of design thinking started to come together in 1991 with the work of David Kelley. He was a professor in Stanford University. So a lot of kind of the preliminary work from John Arnold's concept was crystallized in David Kelley's work in Stanford. And that led to the formation of IDEO. IDEO is a consulting firm. But they also popularized the concept of human-centered design, which is essentially the heart of design thinking. So if I combine all of the competing definitions, if you say design thinking, you're doing a structured process to design products and services. The most important bit is at the end, that puts the user at the center. That's really the key, because you can create things because of problems or ideate because of solutions. But if you skip the user, you end up with this. My team has created an innovative solution, but we're still looking for a problem to go with it. Or there's the popular saying, if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So we have a very solution-centric mentality. And then you peel the onion, you're supposed to look at problems. But actually, if you peel the onion on problems, there's a user behind it. Whether it's an external user, like a customer for your company, or an internal user. This is sometimes counterintuitive. Like people who work in companies, like in functional departments, like finance or HR or operations, they think design thinking is only for marketing, because you're selling to a user. But actually within even especially a large enough company, you have internal users. And if you don't consider their needs and start jumping into tasks, that's where problems start. I think two of the best references in design thinking are the IDEO kit. I think you can download both of these for free. Just Google it, IDEO Field Guide to Human-Centered Design. And I've also find the IBM Field Guide. IBM offers design thinking certifications, actually. I don't know if it's probably for free, but the guide is free. You can download it. So some of the examples in terms of the process that we use were taken from these two references, plus. Okay, so what are the steps to design thinking? So this is now kind of standard design thinking as we know it. Empathy, definition, ideation, prototyping, and testing. That's the 5. but it's not really meant to be a linear process. It's meant to be iterative. It's meant to track back and go wherever. So you can do a first shot of a solution doing it in a linear way, but it's empathy that actually helps define problems. Then your testing phase kind of validate whether you really got the problem correct. So just by saying a problem is a problem won't be enough until you find a way to test it. Then, of course, needs define ideas. But then when you prototype, you're supposed to go back to your ideation and check, did we get the solution right? Or did we match what the user wanted? And in the test phase, you also validate the ideas. And then finally, when you launch something and test it, you'll have your users. This helps you understand if you really got the user definition correct. So ultimately, it goes back to the user. Someone has to use the solution. And I think maybe because of time and cost, people skip that step. Another concept in design thinking is this double diamond, no? The concept of divergence and convergence. And this is both philosophical and practical. The idea here is you're supposed to diverge first and look for many iterations. Even at the problem definition step, you're supposed to do that. And then once you have a lot of these ideas, you crystallize them by clustering them. No? This can happen many ways. No? The traditional approach is to go on a wall, you have Post-its. We actually like that approach. Some have already done this on a more electronic form, like a Miro board or a Trello board. It really doesn't matter how you do it. The point is you actually encourage divergence first. And this is counterintuitive to most people because we have been trained from school to limit ideas. You only give the best idea and that's your proposal for your research. So design thinking turns that around. Before you limit, you have to get as many ideas as possible. And this is actually where most design, in my view, most design thinking fails. You're not able to assimilate as much data as you can, maybe because of time. But I would see this also as the opportunity for AI to come in because AI can give you ideas, but it's now up to the humans to figure out if the ideas are sound. It's a double diamond because you do the divergence and convergence at the problem definition, and then you do it again when you do prototyping and testing. So just because you've already zoomed in on an idea doesn't mean you have one solution. You could have many possible solutions for the idea. So that's also an opportunity to diverge and then later converge on the best performing solution. So here's a practical example of possible activities that involve divergence and convergence. So when you're discovering what the users are, the problems are, you can do immersion, questionnaires, interviews, meetings. So it's actually very qualitative at the start. And sometimes people are not comfortable with that, especially if you come from a data background. You want to get statistics immediately or data. The data comes later, actually, if you ask me. First, the qualitative approach works best at the start. Just, understand who you're solving for. And then when you do definition, that's when data can be useful. You're interpreting the findings from your empathy work, from the stories, you frame opportunities, you set a design challenge. And then by this point, you have some possible ideas. Then you now diverge again and come up with prototypes. No? So again, you can do experiential prototyping, tactile prototyping, or you can do some hackathons, for example. And then when you have so many of these ideas, then you, again, filter the noise and look for the best performing ones through some sort of prioritization process. And then when you're done, you test it in production or you test it in the environment and it evolves from there. So hopefully you get kind of the philosophical underpinnings. The idea of this is counter to, let's say, traditional research where you already kind of define your hypothesis from the start. And it's only at the end when you do data gathering and you find out the hypothesis actually didn't work, then you have to start all over again. In IT, we also call this the waterfall process, which is kind of the non-iterative approach where you define business requirements and then it falls into solution design and then it falls into testing. And then usually at the end of that, you find out that the requirements weren't completely captured. So it ends up costing a lot of money. But then if you're able to do iteration within that process, I think that's where you can find efficiencies. I mean, that's how the agile philosophy evolved. Okay, finally, before we get into the specific process, I wanted to highlight this concept of radical collaboration. It's a term design thinkers use. What does this mean? For a design process to really work, and when I show some examples of what we've done, you'll see it works best if you have a diverse population of people doing it. In other words, it cannot be all programmers, it cannot be all analysts, because you all think very similarly to each other. It works best when you have multidisciplinary, multi-role people. So the traditional trifecta here is people who do the design or work for the user, people who do the engineering, who actually build the thing that needs to be built, and then people who work in business, meaning the organization who's sponsoring this, or maybe the finance people, at the very least should be represented. Because if you remove, let's say, the business side, you come up with maybe possibly interesting solutions for a user, but they could be very expensive to develop. So it's dead, no? If you have technology people and business, you can come up with some really, really cost-effective solutions, but then the user might not use it. This is actually a common phenomena in most corporations, no? And finally, if you remove the technology people and it's just users and business, you come up with all of these fantasy stories, no? That could actually be cost effective, but then you can't deploy them because the tech people were not represented. So you need these three people to at least be present. And there could be more, no? If you can divide it in, like, the business people can be marketing and finance, the technology people can be both hardware and software, or sometimes it doesn't even involve technology in hardware and software terms. It could be, configuration, process. And finally, the user can be both external user or internal user, but I hope you get the gist. Okay, so AI and design thinking. Okay, I'll run you through first the kind of the traditional approach to DT. This is actually also our internal planning process to give an idea of how we do things. And then later I'll tell you how we inject AI into the process, which after you've seen it will be very kind of intuitive in hindsight. Right now, it might be hard to appreciate, where does AI come into all this? But once you've seen it, you'll suddenly realize, oh, no, we could have done that from the very beginning. So this helix diagram shows the 5 steps. The reason why it's a helix is it's supposed to kind of iterate. First step is empathy. No? The point here is you really want to get into the mind of your user. Some people think this step is actually useless, because it sounds very qualitative, very fluffy. But I assure you, this is actually the best indicator of whether your solution will succeed. If you're able to get into the mind of your user, understand everything about them, who they are, what they do, what are their hopes, their fears, and most importantly, what is painful for them. Now, for people who are designing products for an external user, this feels intuitive. But I can tell you, this also works for internal users. And sometimes it's uncomfortable to do it. Like, for example, your internal user could be the CEO of the company, or it could be the CFO, or it could be the staff. Many people are uncomfortable trying to get into the head of their colleagues because it feels political. But I can tell you, that's an essential step, because as many people, I mentioned this in the design thinking, the digital transformation episode, political challenges are often the biggest contributor to a failure of any project. You fail to understand the motivations of your senior executives. So when you present something to them, they don't like it, and then dead. No? So empathy is very important. Okay, if you've done enough empathy work, that actually gives you the basis for the problems. Because now you're not just ideating problems out of thin air, even if you've observed enough kind of phenomena outside. If you're grounding your problem statement based on the pains of a user, whether internal or external, it works better. So you get their profile, define their professional goals, personal goals, and then you ask, what will make this person's life better? And then you start ideating as many problems muna, no? Don't ideate solutions, problems. What do they need to do? What do they need to achieve? What kind of things could they use better? What things hinder them from their goals? And once you have enough of these inputs, the patterns will emerge. So hopefully at this point, you're appreciating that if you start limiting the options at this space, you will ultimately run out of ideas. So this is the time to really go out and get as many inputs as possible. No? Okay, you now have the needs. Now you think how can we address the needs? So from users distill into needs. Now this is where knowing possible solutions can be helpful. We call them enablers. No? Solutions can either be technologies, it can be process changes. I talked about this framework called the 10 types of innovation in the last episode. You can look that up, use that as an example. But you don't look at solutions in a vacuum. You try to look for the intersection of a solution and a need. And that's what you're looking for. And again, this is also a time where you need to come up with many ideas. Again, many ideas. Like person X needs this to achieve that. Can we think of the ways we can use everything from computer vision, machine learning? You can think of anything. Doesn't even need to involve AI, And then when you generate enough of these enabling concepts, again, some patterns will emerge, and then you cluster them, and now you have potential solutions. It's funny how these first 3 steps, most companies actually skip them. They either look at some survey, or maybe they look at some article or market research, and then they just play copycat to that. And this is why in digital transformation, I mentioned last time, companies who actually end up becoming more effective at what they do pretty much ignore market research for the most part. They do market research later to validate if they've done the right thing. But they ignore market research at ideation. Because as Henry Ford said, if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have asked for faster horses. They would never have asked for a car. And it's something worth reflecting on, no? When you think about potentially new products and services in the market. You go directly to a user, ask them what's your problem, how can we fix it? Or even better, and I think the early days of Apple was exactly like this. Sometimes the best products are the products you already want for yourselves. If you design an internal tool that works very well for you, chances are there are at least 100 other people who have a need for such a tool. So many companies actually have the roots of possible service offerings within themselves if they're able to turn that into a commercial offering. An example of this that I discussed last time was Siemens. No? They were very good at sensor data for themselves. And then later they decided to offer that as a service to other industrial companies, and they created a totally new business out of basically an internal function. Okay, assuming you have enough of these solutions, now you need to prioritize. And that's where the prototyping comes in. There are many ways to prioritize. One favorite way we like to do is to put it on a feasibility versus importance axis. So now you have groups of solutions. Let's say you kind of have several. The most priority should be given to things you can already do now and are very important to the user. You go back to your empathy work and check, hey, we can do this app that can do this. Is this something that the user would like? Because we're full of, I would say, companies also are unable to match the two. So they're either full of big ideas that are very revolutionary, but they don't have the capability for it. Or vice versa, the more common approach. They actually have many capabilities, but the users don't care. That's why you have a lot of these white elephant projects in companies now. But it doesn't mean that if you're stuck in kind of one or the other, it's useless. But you have to be cognizant of the additional effort needed. So assuming you already agreed on highly feasible, highly important, that's a no-brainer as we call it. What do you do with the highly important but not feasible? Now you need to do the cost-benefit analysis of, we now need to make it feasible. We need to build capability. Maybe we need to hire some people. We need to get into some technology. And that has a cost implication. But then you justify it by saying, since this thing that we want to do is very, very important, the chances are the adoption will be high, and then you estimate market share revenue. If it's enough to justify the cost, then you take a risk. On the flip side, probably the safer approach, if you have stuff that's already highly feasible that you can already do now, but no one seems to care about it, then the logical approach is to try to make people care about it. Maybe it just needs a little bit more marketing. Maybe it just needs a bit more awareness. And this is both internal and external. Maybe people don't know how these products and services can be used. So demonstrate it, do educational type of marketing. Tell them, hey, look, if you use this device, this is what will happen. And then if you're successful, you will build up demand that can make it viable. And the cost to develop is very low because you can already do it. It's this kind of thinking that seems very simple in hindsight, but when you're in the middle of an ideation process, it's very hard to filter. So I highly recommend that before you do actual prototyping, you do the prioritization. Obviously, if you have solutions that are on the negative for both, they're not important and they're not even feasible. So they become more of a vanity project for a lot of companies or for an executive. I would strongly, try to not do it because it often ends not just with failure, but it demoralizes things. Okay, so those are the 5 basic steps. Actually, I omitted the test step because that's kind of a webinar of its own. But getting to a prototype is very important if you started with empathy. Because if you got to prototype without talking about the user, then you'll end up with hammers looking for nails. No? That's the problem. And this is where I want to talk about AI. So generative AI has kind of this unique ability to answer any question you want or provide you options. And that's why when I talked about where generative AI comes in, I think they fit very well in the high complexity and high uncertainty domain. No? So you don't know what you're looking for. There's a lot of data to go through. That's perfect for generative AI. Because in any other domain here, either the data is simple enough, so you don't even need AI, or the outcome is very straightforward. So you don't really need generative AI to give you options. But in areas where you don't even know what the options look like, generative AI can be very useful. So for example, even at the problem definition stage, generative AI can provide ideas already. Just feed it whatever outcomes you've already had at the empathy stage. Like for example, I gave demographics, what are their main hopes, what are their main fears, and I just asked ChatGPT, suggest the top 10 personal and professional goals given this information, and suddenly you have 20 ideas. I'm not saying these ideas are perfect. I'm not even saying you should stop at 20, should probably gun for more. But imagine if you're in an rapid ideation environment, it can help kind of break all of those writer's blocks and brain knots, which people often get into because there's a natural tendency for people to freeze in ideation if you take them out of their normal environment, because usually you're going to do this offsite during a team building. People are used to the day-to-day monotonous tasks, so their brains are wired that way. It takes time for them to reboot their mind and start thinking of new ideas. But especially if you have AI playing in the mix, suddenly people find an idea that they're worth looking into, and suddenly it explodes. No? Another approach is you might have already a lot of information and you need help integrating it. And this is where generative AI can also be used, especially if you use like an existing framework. Like for example, this example on the left, using a popular framework, which I talked about in episode 6, called the theory of change. Now, if you're an NGO, you need a theory of change, which is basically, this is the current condition and this is the end goal, and I need to fill in the blanks in the middle. You can just basically ask AI to do that. Hey, these are my current conditions. Like here, there are many aspiring data analysts who can't find a job because they have skills, but they don't have work experience. And then the goal is a vibrant ecosystem where people can find jobs easily. I didn't even propose the solution. And the AI provided ideas, help them train themselves better at low cost, come up with credible portfolios, create an ecosystem where companies can offer internships very fluidly. Again, some or none of the ideas might make sense. But again, imagine if you're in an ideation environment and you need to come up with ideas quickly. That can be a game changer for those who are doing ideation. This is probably the most compelling use of generative AI, which I keep talking about ever since episode 1. This is where you actually use two complementary frameworks. that may be unintuitive at the start, and then later AI helps you fill in the blanks. No? For example, I can start with these 4 uses of AI without getting into details. No? Computer vision, language, automation, inciting, and then I can then try to cross it with this business framework, which I love using. This comes from ISO 31000 or the firm framework. So the mission is, given these 2 frameworks, I need scenarios, right? So you just essentially ask AI that, hey, look, trying to research applications of these 4 areas of AI, and then you describe them as it applies to parts of the firm framework. And in a click, you get ideas already. No? And the ideas, again, some of them can make sense, some of them don't make sense. But the point is, you have all of these scenarios which can now result in more design strategies for you. So imagine this happens potentially at step 2 and step 3 between problem definition and solution ideation. And then you narrow down to, okay, which one of these ideas can now have a tremendous impact on our user. No? Okay, so you got the theory. Now I want to show you some examples of how we actually have used this. We actually use this everywhere. Spoiler alert. I won't have time to talk about everything we've done, but probably the best ones are projects you probably have heard of. So we use this a lot in NASA, space apps. We're actually a 3-time winner of NASA, just to let you know. And to be honest, it worked so well in those competitions, we thought we should be using them for other things. At an earlier juncture, we used it to win the Break the Fake Challenge. And then we also used it to create our own data challenges. So just to show you how viral innovation can get if you're able to unlock kind of design thinking from an ideation standpoint. So back in 2019, when we were doing NASA for the first time, they actually allow you to select what challenge you want to achieve. That's the cool thing about NASA. And this is the first time we also saw a reference to the Sustainable Development Goals. So that was the challenge. Figure out what to use with, how to use satellite data and local data to solve an SDG. And obviously at that time, the challenge we saw was dengue. So these are the kinds of resources NASA gives for free. So already you have a lot of enablers. And then SDGs, there were 17 of them. You had to look for the most important one. And clearly, dengue was a big deal. There was no COVID then. So we centered on that. What is really the problem with dengue? And I'll tell you about it in a second. Now, talking about diversity, so this was the team I led through NASA. We are from very different backgrounds. See, Claire is a statistician. Mark is a web developer. Actually, his background is more of IT audit. Ako naman, I actually come from an accounting background, but I had hands-on experience building analytic solutions. Jansen here on the right, he's an electrical engineer, and he was more into satellite data, signal processing. So a really diverse background. And how did the design process help us? So this is really the key insight that led us to the creation of the dengue solution. The idea was spotting dengue was dependent on a few sparse data sets, which is what DOH was publishing. But if you think of it from a kind of how dengue develops, it really starts with the climate. If you have climate that is highly conducive to mosquitoes, and then you have a mosquito population, mosquitoes don't cause the dengue, but they do transmit it. And then you can look at other types of data like Google searches and see what people are behaviorally doing. This is what it means to empathize with the user. What do people normally do when their kids get sick? And then although people die, you don't see that until DOH publishes. So that was the key insight. We can get climate data from satellites. We can get data from Google. And we don't know where the mosquitoes are, but we could infer them from the climate data. And we don't know how many people are dying or getting sick, but if we're able to correlate that with Google searches, then we have an idea. And then later we validate using the DOH data. That was it. And if you can put all of that data into a nice, convenient application, this was the original version of Project AEDES, which we submitted for the NASA Space Apps Challenge. We felt that we wanted to give it in a form that public health professionals, so they were the users we were solving for, could use without even needing to know data science. Just click here. I don't know where the mosquitoes are, but these are the highly likely spots based on the map. And I don't need to know statistics, but if the graph shows that there's a potential spike of dengue coming up in a month or two. So we had about a 2-month look ahead based on trends. And we got it to, at that time, about an 80% correlation, which you didn't need to know the exact number. You just needed to know directionally if it was up or down. Then that's your solution. No? Second example, I want to show, this was an earlier hackathon. It was about fake news. So this was the team. Again, very varied backgrounds. Nico is more into user experience, user design. He's also an electrical engineer. And Carlos Nazareno, who's also a web developer, but his role here was more of research into fake news. Okay. So what was the key insight? The key insight we wanted to pursue was when you have fake news, it's never a solo act. People are working in groups. And from a data perspective, if you're looking at like fake websites, there are some common identifiers you can use to link them together, like their IP address, if an email address appears, or if they're using Google AdSense or Google Analytics, they have these identifiers you can get out of the web page. And then much later, we could also group them in terms of exact words and phrases that each website uses. So now you're able to establish this network of conspirators. No? That was the idea. So the solution was that. No? We had a graph database, which started with a seed of, I think, 80 websites. And then we let the algorithm run looking for similar websites. And we got it to about 3,000 in just one day, no? Or almost 2 days. That we had to shut it down. Otherwise, it would keep finding more and more connections. And remember, this was in 2019, way before the elections. We could already find a massive network of websites. It just so happened that they talked about the same topic, no? Way ahead of any political campaign. No? And here's the thing. The methods we used, the technologies we developed since that time found their way into many other areas. So we started with public health, but then we got into human rights, we got into COVID, we got into fake news, we got into air quality, we got into disaster risk reduction. So this is the value of having a design process where you might have the one capability. This is already at the latter part. You already have ideas, but then you can iterate on where to apply it. So the same technology we used to track COVID virality was now applied to fake news virality. And the same approach we used to track mutation of viruses, you can use that to look at mutation of fake news. So there's a lot of correspondence everywhere you go. Sometimes it sounds oversimplification, like an oversimplification, but when you reduce everything to data, they all behave very similarly. So I think that's an opportunity really for AI to come in. You can develop a solution in one field and then bring it to other field. The downside though, here's the thing, I might as well just say it. All of these domains have experts, right? So you public health people have doctors, human rights have lawyers, and usually, without meaning any disrespect, expert fields are highly protective of their field. They don't want people intruding or trespassing, they call it epistemic trespassing. And I think that's a roadblock to innovation because as we're showing here, being multidisciplinary is the key to innovation. And if you're monodisciplinary, which is the default position for most, as Sir Saito said, no, it's a turf issue, then by default, you are so uninnovative. I'll leave it there. No? Talk about the politics later. So in case you were wondering, these solutions actually have been recognized and continue to be recognized. Tuwa nga kami in 2023. The stuff we did in 2019 was recognized again by the Geovation Awards. No? And it just shows that there's no reason why these solutions shouldn't be used. And the point I'm trying to make here is not really to talk about awards, but you have to find your niche. You have to find the right audience. And sometimes that's the downside. You might have a very good idea or innovation, but you're talking to the wrong people. So again, that's another opportunity to diverge. Look for people who are willing to listen to you and then hit them. We were so happy with this approach that we tried to do it ourselves on behalf of others. So we held this Bangsamoro data challenge. We did it 2 years in a row. And I can tell you, it works like clockwork. You give people the right data, the right framework, give them a few webinars on how this can be used, and suddenly they go off and run in their separate directions and come back with really cool ideas. No, everything from a barter app to a research paper predicting why there's a lot of dropouts that lead to signups in the MILF. There's someone who did a correlation of road quality and seismic data coming from USGS. Easily 100 solutions between those 2 years. So I'm still overwhelmed. We haven't put even a fraction of them into production, but we hope one day we're able to do that and push it out. Okay, so I'm nearing the end of my talk, almost at the hour. I want to end on this slide, which is what I talked about in the recent AI summit. No? It's part of this tech talent and tech report in 2022. And it puts countries on these two axes. No, the y-axis is how much technical talent do you have in your population, percentage-wise, and the x-axis is how much venture investment happens in your country as a percentage of GDP. So we're actually at the worst possible location here. No, and I think this position is wrong, if you ask me. Certainly, the investment level can improve. In fact, Japan isn't doing much better than us, no, as far as investment is concerned. But they are perceived to have more technology talent in their population relative to us. In fact, in some other countries, they're perceived to have less tech talent in their population, but they have better investment prospects. And of course, you have the utopia of Singapore and Israel, no, to look at. So I feel this is more of a marketing issue. I think this is more of a perception issue, because when you think of Philippines, I don't know, if you're based abroad, what do you think about? Call centers, maybe? Or maybe you think of floods, or you think of Duterte or something like that. So I think we need a better marketing for the Philippines. But at the same time, I think from an investment standpoint, there needs to be a change in the investment culture, because I can tell you from personal experience, it's horrible dealing with investors in the Philippines, based in the Philippines. We do much better dealing with investors based abroad because they treat you fairly. No? And of course, that's another webinar of its own. But this is really the food for thought. How do we move the needle? I think we're a little bit here in terms of talent, but the investment climate could certainly improve. I want to give you a quote from Linus Pauling. I think he's a double Nobel laureate. No? And he said the best way to have a good idea is to have a lot of ideas. I think this is the subtle secret sauce to any good innovation. You have to try many, many times. You have to iterate many times. Like I talk about 3-time winning NASA space apps, but we actually tried 6 times. So 50% hit rate, still not bad. But some of those other ideas I thought were pretty good, but the judges didn't think so. So, and that's part of the game. No? When you do design thinking, you have to be ready for failure. Fail fast, as they say. But the culture we have in our companies sometimes hates failure, no, for some reason. Okay, so that's kind of the talk. I hope you enjoyed that. Before we dive into Q&A, I just want to encourage everyone. If you want a copy of the slides, again, the usual suspect, you can get it from bit.ly/AI for lunch design thinking. This is case sensitive. I'll drop it in the live Zoom and in Facebook in a bit. And then this is my customary call to invite everybody to please link up with me on social media. I'm on TikTok, I'm on Instagram, I'm on YouTube, I'm on, of course, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. So please do. I haven't really been active beyond the last 3 months, but I think now's really the time to link up. Yeah. So those who want a copy, I'm pasting the link here on Zoom, and then I'll paste it in a bit on Facebook. Okay. Other things. If you or your company want a free briefing on this topic or any related topic to AI, please reach out. I'm certainly open to doing it at no cost, as long as it stays within 1 hour. Or if you want something more, I would say, more specific, I'm more than happy to oblige. No, if you want to talk about something about, for example, specifically design thinking or digital transformation, I can do that. This webinar is actually found on YouTube. I'll be uploading it after this. It's also live streamed on Facebook right now. And then, yes, actually, I've been talking about this for a while. And in fact, if you'll permit me, I want to play again just a 2-minute video about this design thinking with AI program that we're looking to launch. So before Q&A, I'd like to run this by everyone, and then let's have a question and answer.
In the era of AI, everyone can study the math. Everyone can pick up programming. What separates those who talk about AI and those who get things done is the quality of their ideas. Introducing design thinking with AI, powered by Seralytics, a structured process to empathize, define, and ideate solutions with AI. Through this 3-day workshop, participants will be immersed in a creative process centered on the user to build solutions with artificial intelligence. Through our Design Thinking with AI program, participants will walk away with a proven process to generate clear problem statements for specific users and create unique solutions for business, personal, and societal challenges. Our people are passionate about using data for social impact. We understand the ethical use of data and AI. Using design thinking with AI, we have predicted epidemics from social media and satellite data. We have fought for human rights and promoted innovation through big data analytics. From data visualization to computer vision to natural language processing and process automation. Through the power of design thinking, we hope to unlock the broad adoption of AI in the Philippines. Design Thinking with AI, powered by Seralytics. AI-driven innovation, human-centered impact.
Okay, thanks a lot, everyone. So that's it. I think we still have half an hour left in the webinar. Let's get talking about questions now. So if anyone has a question on the live chat, please let's start reading the live chat now. Design is established as the primary priority. So this is Almer. It's 75% done. Yeah, actually. In fact, a lot of the badly designed things I showed earlier is probably because they skipped a step, no? So that's important. We need cooperation to brainstorm more ideas. Yeah, exactly. The more people you have at the ideation, the entire design stage, the better. Usually what happens is the design part starts with a small group of people, and then usually it's cascaded to more people when it's already almost fully formed, and the ability to correct it doesn't happen. So that's where it fails, no? Si Titus says, design thinking is an art worth diving into. It's a game changer. Yeah, I agree. You know, we use it a lot and we've achieved a lot of things with it. I was always had an impression that design skill or design thinking is another form of intelligence. You know what? This is something that came up in one of the workshops we've run. There's a very strong bias towards artistic talent when you talk about creativity. And design thinking is a way of showing that you can be creative beyond art. You can be creative with words. You can be creative with technology. I would argue software development is a creative skill rather than just a STEM field. But you know, we try to treat it more like a scientific endeavor. In fact, science is pretty much a creative skill as well. No? Mathematics is also creative. So I think this bias of parang ring fencing creativity to just the artsy people, I think that's the wrong move. Oh, Almer says, for me, design is a priority based on experience. You can define the tech plan. Then the client will say something else. Yep. you need to involve the client up front. No? Okay. Any other questions? Okay, on Facebook, si Mabi. Oh, if you want to get into Zoom, just come in. No? Maybe we didn't see you earlier. No? Yeah, we still have some people in the waiting room. Sige, I'll let them in now. Okay. There were some questions that came in through the registration, so maybe we can go through them. Ito muna, si Dean. No? What companies or institutions in the Philippines are actively trying to incorporate AI techniques? I actually have no idea. Although through AAP, we're starting to get ideas that not even the top 1,000 corporations. In fact, I was talking to a top corporation just recently, and they find all of this very alien. And that's ironic, but actually not surprising, because you could argue by default, these large incumbents are pretty mature in their process, and they don't necessarily tolerate new things, because why fix what's not broken? No? So yeah, something to think about. No? Okay, here we go. Nico from Facebook. I'm amazed at how your team wants to make change in the Philippines using data. Do you have an internship? Okay, message me separately for that. No, we actually are thinking of something similarly. I feel that there's a big inefficiency right now with tech talent, especially data talent. So yeah, sige Nico, please message me about that. Okay, so let's go to the Q&A. Application of design thinking for tech startups. So this process works, I think, equally well for startups who want to create a new product, but also for mature companies who want to innovate internally. I think the counterintuitive step is the empathy work, because most people kind of don't think you need to do that if you're already working in a company. I argue you should, because again, the success or failure of your internal project isn't necessarily the product itself. It's actually how people will endorse it or adopt it or approve it. So it's usually political. But if you do empathy work, you can actually find a way of working that to your advantage. Design thinking uses creative problem solving and a human-centered approach. Yep, that's the definition. How will AI siguro to. AI help me to generate the problems to be encountered. Well, kaya nga, I feel that the empathy needs to start with people first. Don't use AI to empathize. That's the wrong move. But once you've already done enough data gathering on your empathy, you can interview people. You can actually use AI to summarize interviews. Yung pala, no? Record the transcript. It's very, very long. You drop it into AI and it will come up with a 10-point summary of what's been discussed. It works like magic, no? And then when you have all these bullets from the people or ideas from the empathy work, then you ask AI to come up with some high-level needs analysis. Or if you already have the needs, you cross it with another framework, parang kanina, the way I did the firm framework and AI, and then you come up with scenarios. So that's actually how you leverage AI for design thinking. Now here's another question internally from Mark Dell. How to use design thinking in data-related jobs? No? Well, there's two ways to go about it. You can use design thinking to improve the job itself. So for example, how do you do a better data pipeline? What kind of visualizations can you use? Those are all design choices, for example. Or even better, how do you design a data product? A data product is parang si Waze. No? Waze is a data product, one of my favorites. And to use Waze, you don't need to be a rocket scientist. You just need to know where to go, no, and where you are, and it does all of the math. So parang ganon, can you design a data product within your company that solves a fundamental problem? It can be something as, as basic as, filing, summarizing, organizing things, to something more complex like forecasting, trending, monitoring, doing root cause analysis. That can all become an application or a product or a service that you can design. That's one half. The other half is actually using the data itself that you have access to come up with ideas. And I think that's a bit more, complicated, but it's not any less important. No? Okay, what else? Looking forward to learning more about design thinking. Yeah, certainly. If you have any questions, please fill up the survey so you can get a copy of this. What are the domains that are not applicable? That's a good question. So I don't know if there are any domains that are not really applicable for design thinking, but perhaps if there's no opportunity to innovate, as in you're just following orders, then there's no point designing. But I think the argument there could be, why aren't people entertaining opportunities to do things better? And then there's also the opposite problem where you keep iterating, but you don't bed a process into maturity. Or you iterate too soon. You didn't give an existing process enough time to mature. That's also a problem. So just like in data analysis, you have to observe the predictions over time to see if they align with reality. Design thinking also follows the same path. Once you've done an iteration, you have to observe it in reality to see if there's any impact. In fact, there's a concept called A/B testing or champion challenger, where you look at two parallel processes, the existing process and the iterated one, and then find a way of comparing the results. That can be a luxury for some companies, for example, because it costs money to do two different approaches, and then you should be able to manage the customer impact. Like marketing as an example, some people will receive a promo and some people will not, because you need a control population to check if your promo actually worked. How will you explain that? What if they happen to live in the same house? Now that's actually an issue, because most likely you didn't do your segmentation properly. So this one person with two people with the exact same profile got two competing offers. Okay, what if a certain design was generated through AI and the number of users tend to claim it as IP? Okay, I think this is more a question of, did AI generate an idea that's the copyright of someone, perhaps? No? I don't know, maybe that's a case-to-case thing, because if it was generated by AI, I would argue it's already public domain. No? But if it's really patented by someone, then you just need to do kind of your due diligence to see if it was, already a copyrighted thing. So I don't know the answer to that. Maybe just more due diligence. And again, I would argue that if it already came out of the AI, it was publicly available. So again, some people are actually suing OpenAI for using copyrighted work. Why is design thinking a relatively unknown topic? I don't know. I don't know. Anyone's guess. Maybe I would argue it wasn't a popular approach. Kasi nga 1991 pa lang naman si IDEO. That's one. And if I'm going to take a stab at the possible answer, it's because our economy is dominated by a relatively few number of incumbent companies. We're used to dealing with the same brands again and again. And they mostly all existed before 1991. So they might not have had the opportunity to do much design thinking. While the emerging market naman, the MSMEs, again, their strategies were shaped by the incumbents. But I would argue, like I've been into many startup events. Most startups are actually doing some form of design thinking. They may not be doing the exact approach I talked about, pero yung 5-step approach, they're doing that. No? So again, I just showed you how we do it internally, showed you the results. So up to you guys to judge if it's worth your time and effort. I really think it is. And the reason why I'm also sharing it is I'm very, very disturbed at that graph where we're on the lowest level. Parang I feel na, is it just because people don't know how to design stuff? So yeah, let's let it loose and see what happens. You can tell how much design thinking was considered based on the complaints on user character. That's so true. In fact, maybe I'll talk about this in another webinar and talk about marketing. One common life hack in a company is to put customer service and marketing under the same roof. Because usually customer service is under operations and marketing is under the marketing head. Now, I'm not saying they should be both under the marketing head, but at least they should find a way to interact, because I think customer complaints are an excellent source of product development. Diba? So it actually is funny when you find companies who already have a lot of complaints, pero when they want ideas for new products, they hire pa some fancy consulting firm to do market research. You already have internal market research based on your complaints. So you find them launching, may tinatamaan dito, but you find them launching all these fancy new product offerings, pero when you try to get into their customer hotline, you can't even get in. So I'll leave it to you to decide who that company is. Actually, there are several who are like that. Okay, so that's it for internal questions. I don't know if there's still any other questions on the live Zoom or on Facebook. So maybe I'll wait for going once, going twice. But otherwise, I want to thank everyone. Here's another one. Okay, what value can design thinking present to change management? So change management, at least that actually gave me an idea pala, no, Titus. Maybe we should do AI in project management. So change management is about how a new product or service or process is absorbed by an organization. And I think one of the easiest places for not just design thinking, but for AI can make an impact is how information is disseminated to people. Like this is essentially knowledge management, no? Which is always a weakness in most companies, as I've seen. It's very hard to find information about a certain process. So imagine if you're onboarding someone new, it takes time for them to learn it. In some companies, mature ones that I've worked with, particularly banking and IT, I've had the privilege of working with companies that have very mature knowledge management, as in there's an internal website, it's updated often. And in one IT company that I worked with, it's essentially an internal social network. You can link up with any professional anywhere in the world, and they have this parang internal GitHub repositories where they post their projects. Really cool. Pero yun na nga, it can be a luxury for many companies. So yun, information dissemination and also scenario planning, no? Like I was brainstorming with another group on risk management naman. That will probably be another webinar. Risk management is all about coming up with scenarios. No? What if this happens? What if the building burns down? What if there's an earthquake? And if you have very, very clear and concise instructions about what to do, and you make sure that's disseminated to everyone, then I think you minimize the risk of, kasi nga every time you have a risk, and again, I think we need a webinar on risk management. It's always about preventing an incident from happening. But also, if in case it does, it's minimizing the mistakes of dealing with the incident, kind of the execution risk or operational risk component. And both can be addressed, I think, with proper information. Good question. Okay, anyone else who has a question or topic they want to bring up? So again, please answer the survey if you want to get a copy of these slides. I think they're actually, we had a very, very good attendance for this webinar. So thank you everyone for coming in. Almer, si Dean, Irvin, Mark Del, Michael, Paul, Ren, Titus, and Paula. No? So thanks for I know some of you are like ano na mga suki na. No? So I want to end with this one, bit.ly/AI for lunch design thinking, and that you can get copies of the slides. Oh, si Dean has a comment. The talent versus investment chart is really disturbing. Yeah, I mean, talk about it, no? And this was written by a consultant. So in other words, it really more reflects, I'll jump to that slide, no? Yeah, no, pangit, no? It really reflects the global perception of the Philippines, no? So according to Dean, the San Francisco Bay Area is really exploding because so much VC money that used to go to crypto scams are moving into AI. So yeah, I think that's the problem. So if I look here, and again, this is not judging countries now. The countries that are getting way more investment relative to their GDP, despite having a low percentage of talent, you got to wonder why that's happening. And then the ones naman who have a relatively high talent pool, but they're not getting enough investment, these are gems, no? Why can't money go there? No? And then you have the kind of the sweet spot where both talent and capital investment is coming in. So yung sinasabi ni Dean nandito, US, they're on the line, but everyone else is kind of above or below the line. So at any point below this line is, for me, inefficient in terms of investment. You're investing in a relatively lower talent pool. And then anything above this line is also inefficient, but in terms of opportunity loss. No, you have more talent relative to population, but you're not investing in them. Like Canada seems like a standout here. No? And guess, spoiler alert, there are lots of Filipinos in Canada. Paul says, thanks, Doc, for the informative webinar. I really enjoyed it since I came after finishing the SP 1001. Yeah, there's a Project Sparta class on design thinking. So you'd find it very complimentary. All right, so thank you very much. That was episode 8. I hope you enjoyed this. Please watch this on YouTube. I'll be uploading it after the talk. And in the meantime, have a good weekend. And yeah, I'll see you in the next webinar.